They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
Hi everybody, welcome. It's the 23rd of August 2025. Hope everybody's doing well. I was going through a bunch of folders I haven't seen for a while, and I had a few epiphanies, as always seems to be the case when you're going through a lot of information on a topic, right? I gotta fight with my glasses before the show even starts. That's only because in the studio the lights are so bright you can actually see how much dirt you got. We're almost finished. It's the best way to get the smudges off your glasses is bright lights. You need the right kind of lights. My lights are, each of my lights have 600 digital lights. I was going through these folders, and I was finding all kinds of stuff we haven't talked about for a long time. And there was some stuff there that we have talked about fairly regularly, but I was starting to see all this stuff, and I started realizing how much we don't cover. An astronomical amount of radiation found in downtown Tokyo. You're talking 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo. Downtown Tokyo is a couple of million people, I'm sure. But it's all one and the same. You can't have downtown contaminated and not the rest of it. You're talking about 240 kilometers away. And remember, they're growing food in those 14 prefectures, which includes Tokyo. And it was banned by 55 countries for a decade. 30 of them removed it. 20 still have the ban in place, and Canada was never one of them. Canada had no restrictions. They kind of had restrictions for about 93 days, and they removed all restrictions. And so most of the radioactive food was shipped to Canada, which is an egregious crime against the population. Astronomical amount of radiation found in downtown Tokyo. Right, so you had all these, you're talking about 14 years ago. And so everybody's ate that food. And now they're starting to get sick from it. And so for the last couple of years, they've been bringing in millions and millions of refugees and giving them full credit lines. They can go buy a house, they can get a vehicle, they have a guaranteed income for the first 4 or 5 years. They have all kinds of medical and dental and healthcare, which the typical Canadian doesn't have. And it's like a replacement you see showing up, right? After the post-Fukushima poisoning. Astronomical amount of radiation found in downtown Tokyo. Horrific reading where kids are playing in Fukushima on top of it. Extreme levels found where food is grown for elementary school lunches. A nuclear expert was upset by the discovery. But it sure seems like an agenda, doesn't it? Former U.S. government official, the elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation, radioactive fallout, when it comes to the Pacific Ocean animal die-off. Now, we've been covering die-offs. We've just done 4 videos in a row. But we're looking at worldwide. It's not just the Pacific Ocean. But the Pacific Ocean is blatant, catastrophic, apocalyptic die-offs we're seeing, an emaciation of all the species. Government has totally failed to inform the public about the full extent of any extent for that matter. There was reports on it, but it wasn't symmetrically throughout the media and the world. Media silence is deafening, mentions coverage by E&E, which doesn't exist anymore. But all of these headlines were based up on multiple headlines that day from the mainstream media, and they would all be linked under each of the stories. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste, 100,000 atoms a kilogram. This is such an important story. So, like 100,000 atoms a kilogram is a dirty bomb before Fukushima happened. They're burning it, and you can't destroy it by burning it. You're just releasing it into the environment to be incinerated. So it sounds like it's going to be destroyed, but it doesn't work that way. You can't destroy it. 1 billion pounds of debris to be 1 billion pounds at 100,000 atoms per kilogram. These are incredible numbers. It's multiple nuclear accidents in releases, what you're talking about. And in poison, there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Hi, everybody. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste, 1 billion pounds of debris in the exclusion zone, 100,000 atoms per kilogram. So when you see Becquerel, you're talking about a physical atom that pulses energy. We're basically recreating Fukushima all over again as clouds of radiation continue across the ocean to the Pacific Northwest. Let me give you a depiction of what that actually means. It's a continuous cloud covering the entire planet after 20 days, and they're burning it, and so there's even more being added into the environment. Every time there's a forest fire, you're liberating decades of radioactive sequestering back into the ecosystem from like weapons testing and accidents and emissions from the 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. We'd be like Chernobyl on steroid if the spent fuel catches fires as a nuclear engineer worked at an identical plant. That's such an important one, too, because you're talking about 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. These are in the fuel pools at the top of the buildings. So you're talking about over 6 million pounds. Now, it's common practice to stuff what they call stuffing the fuel pools, and they changed the rules so they can put more in the fuel pool because they don't have a repository. So if the fuel pool, which is at the top of the building, goes, it would be like Chernobyl on steroids. Well, clearly you had 4 buildings that had that particular attribute. And when you look at a year later at reactor 4 building to your left, there can be no doubt that you lost the entire inventory of each of the buildings. And it's kind of the same thing with reactor 3. When you see the explosion of reactor 3, you're actually seeing the reactor core and the fuel pools ejected out of the buildings. And so it's not a long show tonight, but my voice kept telling me, do a show, Dana. Just do the show. Don't think about it. Just go do that show. That's important. Get it. Because we're in the middle of die-off. All next week is going to be die-offs again. So 3450 assemblies. Get that wrong. 3450 times, and each assembly is 100 fuel rods. Each rod is 18 pounds and 12 foot long. So each assembly is 1,800 pounds. So that's 6,200,000 pounds. That's over 7 reactor cores for sure. But the problem is they don't have a repository. And so the reactors were 40 years old, so the inventories that were there were quite huge. Nuclear scientists like zombies, the parasites that hijack human minds. Because you've been listening, if you go back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and listen to the old duck and cover videos and everything else, you'll hear them. In one side of the mouth, they're saying it's like a radioactive fallout is like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, flying on an airplane, sleeping next to somebody. And every decade, you'll see a new generation of scientists, and this is what they'll tell you. It's like a banana, a potato chip, walking in the sunshine, sleeping next to somebody, climbing mountains, flying on an airplane. And you go 10 years ahead and you get a new generation of nuclear scientists, and they're in the media, they're telling you the exact same thing. And generation after generation have told you that lie. It's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing mountains and sleeping next to somebody and flying planes. And so our nuclear scientists like zombies, the parasites that hijack human minds, because the population is unbelievably asleep. They're, it's not just SpongeBob and The Simpsons and Spider-Man and the Hulk, the indoctrination machines that lull people into complacency into thinking that nuclear is somehow safe or healthy or turn you into a superhero or it's a joke like a cartoon like The Simpsons or even worse. So, like SpongeBob is targeting children at 2, 3, 4 years of age all the way up until 11, 12, 13 years of age. And then The Simpsons takes over their brain, along with Spider-Man is already firmly entrenched in a lot of children's minds. They want school bags with Spider-Man or the Hulk on it or even blankets and pillowcases with Spider-Man and the Hulk on it, right? So each reactor, now we lost each reactor. The problem with that is there was 4 of them, right, in a row. That each building had 3,450 assemblies, at least 6 million pounds. And that's the way you got to assume it, right? Why would you build the reactors in a place with a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis 300 feet high and you're less than 100 kilometers from the tectonic plates, where you're guaranteed a big one, the worst type of earthquake? You're guaranteed that to happen every few decades anyway, and which is what Japan's always seen, right? They have a 3,000-year history. They have signs at 300 feet, don't build homes below this level, and they don't know who put them there, but they've been there for 100 years. Don't build your homes below this level because of tsunamis. Yet they built the reactors right alongside the tectonic plates in a sub-abduction. Tectonic plates are guaranteed to cause significant events, right? Nuclear expert, all it takes is coolant to stop circulating at the spent fuel pool. Number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1, it doesn't matter. For extensive fuel damage to occur. And so what they're talking about there is the fuel actually breaks down without cooling circulating water. So it's a little different than a meltdown, but it can release its inventories because it's heating up, but it's just the way the material breaks down. It doesn't necessarily always have to catch fire or something, right? Fukushima Daiichi worker, I saw black smoke, which is a very frightening thing if you have a carrion, if you have a solar, an eclipse from the sun, or an event from the sun, EMP from the sun that takes out all the power grids worldwide. Every nuclear plant and fuel pool is going to melt down within a couple of days. It's the most idiotic thing you would ever have on your planet because of its particular attribute. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, so it shouldn't be on your planet, see? Fukushima Daiichi worker, I saw black smoke that came from the common spent fuel pool chimney. The common spent fuel pool was across the street rather, of reactor number 4, which is that building there. So just across the street. Not like hundreds of yards, but across the street. And this was a 190-foot building. That doesn't exist. And the inventories, the decades of reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the top of the building. The same thing for reactor 3, where it was the pressure built up in the reactor was already at 1,000 pounds per square inch, and it just ejected everything out when it finally let go. So think of a car tire at 1,000 pounds per square inch instead of 30. And you can imagine what it's going to look like when it blows up, right? Well, it's the same thing for these buildings, right? Your pressure builds up in these huge, massive containers, but they're not designed to take that kind of pressure. So because they can hold a lot of pressure, they're built, some places 6 feet thick. So what that means is when it finally lets go, it's the extreme of extremes, right? And so the common spent fuel pool had decades of reactor cores from all the reactors, and we know that it had windows down low. It's not a very tall building compared to the reactor building. We know the tsunami ran right through it. Right, there was declassified pictures released in 2021. It was 736. You can look it up on my site. 736 mystery pictures, and you'll find the video, which was from this year's anniversary. I had done a series, a 14-video series. It was a grueling experience. But we were trying to cover all these different facets of Fukushima because there's so many facets to a nuclear meltdown. I wonder if it was the smoke or boiler. It's not fire. My last video from last night's show didn't render until tonight. So I went in to go look at statistics. There was no statistics, nothing. There was no numbers. There was no how many people viewed it in your control panel. So they're up to something new. They're censoring me a new way now, I guess. Fukushima chief was pleading for help from the United States military. Well, there's nothing you can do at a meltdown. Like the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha shines, the X-rays from that inventories will melt your organs in a few moments. So it doesn't matter how stoic you are or how brave, you still can't do nothing. There's nothing on the planet. There's no electronics. And James put out a mock-type video of robots, and all the robots were getting destroyed, which was an accurate depiction. Electronics can't work in an environment. Despite them telling you it does, it doesn't. And there's a question, that we used to ask after Fukushima was, how come they haven't built any robots since Chernobyl? They had a lot of time to get ready for the next meltdown. They know there was going to be another meltdown. They know there's going to be another one too. Because they're extending the life of all the nuclear power plants. We're definitely going to have another event. Most likely it's going to be close to the tectonic plates. We can't do anything. Please, leader turned pale after seeing the flames and black smoke. The black smoke is not smoke, it's unburnt fuel, where the fuel overheats, and it's released as a fine particulate, but these particulates are splitting atoms forever. It's the worst case scenario for a planet. And Fukushima was over the top because the fuel pools were full of decades of reactor cores. It could have been up to 36 reactor cores being lost, and each one was, because of pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It didn't have any spent fuel pools, etc., 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 etc. So Chernobyl, Fukushima was probably 3,600 Chernobyls in toxicity and inventories. Especially when you're talking about particulates, they're splitting atoms forever, releasing isotopes from billions and billions and trillions of places all around Japan and in the ocean. Workers tries to have last meal before dying and realizes he's unable to taste food. So you're talking about these people, catastrophic doses. Radiation forecast was held by the government. Releasing it would cause unnecessary panic. But you didn't give the government the authority, the monetary, the equipment to hide it when it happens, right? That's not their job. Their job is not to make decisions against you, right? Their job is you hired them because somebody needs to have that position to protect the population. Instead, they protect the nuclear industry by suggesting it didn't happen. Would cause unnecessary panic. Well, the speedy system they're talking about, they're alluding to, in the first month produced 5,500 models of radioactive fallout. They didn't release it to the population. They bought it, paid for it, trained the people, gave them the authority, the equipment. Ministry decided such data would be unavailable because they would lose power. People would abandon the town, they wouldn't have any power anymore. So the people that were making decisions weren't nuclear experts, right? They were just the average Joe and mom and pop, so to speak, in a government agency that didn't want to lose their cushy job. Radiation forecasts kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society, but that's why you have typical nuclear plant would have 100 sirens around American plants within 10 miles so the population can get ready to evacuate, which is the craziest story imaginable. There's no other industry, there's no other business, there's no other corporation, there's no other entity on the planet that has that attribute where everybody within 10 miles have to run away if it breaks down. And you don't, if it's nuclear, you don't go back. They're going to lie to you and tell you it's safe, but you never go back. And therefore that industry shouldn't even exist on your planet. Why is it on your planet? When nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, why is it on your freaking planet? Shocking, officials made it mandatory to use Fukushima rice in school lunches. So the most vulnerable of society were sacrificed. Like you're talking about 13,646 out of 38,200 children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters in the first year. You really think that changed? You really think that stopped? You really think that's not a catastrophic event? The numbers pre-Fukushima were 1 in a million. And the most important subject in history got 11 viewers, and 8 likes, and 10 votes. Are nuclear scientists like zombies, the parasites that hijacks humans' minds? I don't know how else you could describe them. Officials made it mandatory, officials, not nuclear experts, nuclear academics, nuclear universities, nuclear scientists, or nuclear foundations, nuclear corporations, but officials, government employees, made it mandatory to use nuclear deadly radioactive rice in school lunches. And this is absurdness that could even happen. But it happened constantly. All of this pre-Fukushima would be just inconceivable. Post-Fukushima, they all came on board. Once one of them got away with it, all the other communities were doing the same thing. It's like Russian roulette. Only 10% of the school lunches in Fukushima tested for radiation. Officials didn't even know testing equipment was available. An official is just your local government bumbling idiot, moron, inbreed, that probably wouldn't even use the equipment even if you did know it was there, but that's good plausibility, deniability, right? Only 10% of the school lunches in Russia tested. So it is like Russian roulette. And the people that were testing it didn't know what they were doing or how to test it. And that the equipment they were given were inferior, was only looking at best for minute gamma. They weren't looking for alphas and betas and neutrons. And they were already in a nuclear wasteland surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radioactive topsoil that was scooped up by the homeless and destitute and the victims of society. Nothing screams betrayal more than the nuclear industry and everything in it. Like they're so used to getting away with crimes against humanity that that's what they do for a living now. It become normal. It become more emboldened by the ignorance and the complacency of the humanity on the planet Earth. And the people in the know are getting paid wealthy. They're taken care of, and they're put in a position to commit more crimes, but they get paid a lot of money to do it. And we got too many examples of that now to deny it anymore. But it's well known in the academic community that you go to university, get incredible education, to get a job that will allow you to come out and tell a lie because you have such an education, people won't be able to perceive that you would lie because you're too well educated, too connected. So these journalists each are making about $1 million a year, just shy of $1 million a year. This is just a fraction of them because they pretended they were on Fukushima Reactor 4. So how many other betrayals have they participated in? It's like the story is insane. Why would you pretend you're on top of... This is the media, CBS, BBC, CNN, ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega. It's not just the reporters, it's the media too, see? So the producers, the editors, the videographers, the sound men, all of these have to participate in that lie for that lie to work. And then what we've seen now clearly post-Fukushima was all the universities and all the media have to participate in the lie for the lie to work. And all the nuclear plants, etc., and pundits on TV have to participate in the lie. They're aware of what they're allowed to say and not to say, and generally they won't talk about the subject unless it's scripted out by the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're the zombie bot. Fukushima Daiichi worker, I think all reactors will be in crisis after a major aftershock. We don't have enough people to settle down number 4 fuel pool and other reactors. Well, number 4 fuel pools don't even exist. Or the reactors 1, 2, 3, and 4. They actually don't exist. They poison everything on the planet now. TEPCO chairman, which is the corporation, is supposed to be all capital letters. If crisis worsens, it's difficult legally to order workers to stay at Fukushima plant when all of them could die. We can't give them an order that might lead to their deaths. But that's what they done with all the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. They said, right, the homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die. You can't do that with TEPCO workers because the union would freak out and then they would get sued, right? But the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language, I just wanted to do an hour show about this stuff because I had a train of thoughts and I find it very worrisome. And when you're doing all these die-off shows, people kind of miss the point or the reason. Officials reveals contamination levels at Fukushima plant are likely higher outside the reactors than inside. So this is the most insane statement. It's the most insane statement imaginable. Because inside, you would imagine, inside the reactor, of course, anybody you know will tell you that you're going to melt. Your organs will melt in just a couple of moments if you get exposed to something like that. So if it's outside the reactor, then that means anything within proximity of the buildings is going to have melting organs. The buildings are not thick enough to shield you from unprotected fuel, right? Unshielded fuel, which is out of water. Deeper they checked on their Fukushima plant, the higher the contamination levels get, now sampling over 40 feet below the surface. So what they're doing is they're drilling holes around the site, and then they'll put a pump down there. Well, they'll put a hose down there, and the idea is to siphon up water and then test it for radiation, because everything flows down to the Pacific Ocean. It's right on the Pacific Ocean, right? And this is what they were originally. That's what they were putting in the tanks, was stuff they were pumping up. But so say you got a big piece of property and you're on the side of a mountain, and I go on your property, and your property got a big barbed wire fence all around it. So I go all along the edges of the fence, and I dig random holes all over the site. And what I'm trying to do is capture the water coming down the mountain, through your property, and then down towards the ocean. How much of that water am I going to capture by digging a bunch of 2-inch wells all over the site? I'm not going to catch very much, right? The water has to pass through the well, and then I can vacuum that up, right? So maybe a percent of a percent of a percent of the water I'm going to be able to extract through that technique at best, on a good day, on the best day. So Fukushima is no different. Fukushima can't contain what was already lost on top of that, and what was ejected right out of the buildings on top of that. How are you going to put that genie back in the bottle and then get it by digging wells around the site? How does that work? It doesn't. The plume covers the planet in 20 to 30 days in every study. I've already done that. Hang on here. That's where we left off. The deeper they check on it, the planet is right there. And women and minorities and homeless and prisoners were used by the nuclear industry for the most dangerous work. They have a long legacy of victimizing not nuclear scientists, not nuclear students, not nuclear academics, not nuclear companies. They're not working in that environment. It's people that have no concept of what nuclear is. That's the people that's working there, and are very desperate for money, and are typically homeless. Even disgusting parasitic Forbes said it's outrageous that the homeless people are being sold to companies who put to work on the Fukushima radiation. And the gangsters, not nuclear scientists, they're the first thing from a gangster. They're the guys that will poison you and tell you that it's good for you. It's like a banana and a potato chip. Nuclear slaves at Fukushima, workers have debts paid off, forced to stay as indentured servants, and foreign workers may soon be needed at the plant. 2013. In 2014, they announced they were going to allow foreign blue-collar workers to work at Fukushima with a visa, to come to Japan with a visa and go to work at Fukushima and make yourself some good dollars. And we covered it for about 6, 7, 8 days straight. We came out very loud about it. And back then I had good traction, right? And then all of a sudden they canceled doing that. There was a bit of an uproar got created, a controversy. Why would foreign workers don't know nothing? They don't even speak Japanese, can't read the Japanese signs. Right? And the place was controlled by gangsters who are going to be going into death zones. We have the documentation of the death zones. And we know that when the reactor is ejected, the reactor core out of the buildings, the whole site is off limit to any. There's no way you're not going to get significant damage anywhere on the site with this kind of event taking place. Shortage of homeless is becoming real. More and more companies too close to personal dose limits are exceeded. Like a lot of these dosimeters, stationary dosimeters on the site, Geiger counters, are power washed regularly, and then they put clean dirt around it and everything else so you get a lower number. And we got thousands of employees that acknowledged they didn't have any dosimeters, Geiger counters whatsoever. And that the ones they had to wear a lead shield over it. Because people just don't understand radiation. And the whole industry is counting on that particular attribute that the population doesn't understand. Workers are fired once they have heat stroke. It's not heat stroke, it's radiation sickness. Because there's lethal doses all over the site during this period where they had no control over certain parts of the site because fuel had fell on the ground, right? And you couldn't survive it. They would send homeless people over there and they would drop dead. And then there was 16,000 homeless workers quit at the one time almost because people were dropping dead all over the place. And word got out. Excuse me. So let me find it. I can't remember what year that story came out. I could probably find it though on a good day. There we go. I know roughly where it's to. Right there. Yeah, 16,000, not 15. 16,000 workers. That was 2012, folks. These are not workers. These are not union workers or workers like these are not pipe fitters. These are not welders. These are not tradesmen. These are homeless and destitute and victims of society. 16,000 homeless have quit severe working conditions. 16,000 because people were dropping dead, right? That's the only reason you're going to see a mass exodus at a... Because a lot of people don't understand, they'll take the job. I mean, people were being paid $3,000 a day. Do you really think they survived to pick up their check? The average person was making $11 US a day. Do you think that's nuclear scientists? My apologies, I could have turned the microphone down. A Fukushima Daiichi worker died, had been preparing a cover for unit number 3, also affectionately known as Medusa. There's unit 3. So they were working to put a cover over whatever was left. I screwed it up. Hang on here. Yeah, number 3. That's number 3 right there. And if you don't die preparing a cover for that, then... And it's not... Like, you'll never hear them say nuclear scientist died working at number... Or nuclear scientist this or nuclear scientist that, right? You're not going to hear it. You're going to hear worker. And, like, a nuclear scientist is not going to Fukushima and put a tungsten vest on. Right? At reactor 3. So when they worked at that reactor, they had a tungsten vest on. That's where a worker died too, right? At number 3. A tungsten vest the idea is to protect you from gamma shines, neutron, and X-rays from melting your organs, but it doesn't work that way. It'll go right through that vest. I can't stop you. It'll melt your brain too, see? It gives them the illusion. They probably weren't even tungsten vest. Hence the reason why 16,000 people quit, right? In order to complement the remote work, visual inspection is necessary. So homeless, wearing heavy tungsten vests, take turns to go up on a platform. They're up there for 4 or 5 minutes, and then they get down and they go home and you never see them again. Well, not home, they go back to their homeless shelter and communicate with other remote control operators to carry out the work. Workers who go up on the platform are exposed to a significant amount of gamma shines, neutron bombardments, beta rays, alphas, X-rays, catastrophic amounts, unsurvivable amounts. Because in the United States, it was 500,000 times above what they considered a normal level. So how bad was it at ground zero? You can't grow food or live within 30 miles of it, but you're going to be safe at ground zero? Do you really think that's how it works? You can't sleep in the communities, but you can work at the plant and have a good day when you go home. Really? Really? Have you ever seen interviews of anybody at Fukushima? Oh, yeah, it's great there. Everybody's a great crew. We all play around. And we get together, drink sake, play pachinko. It's a good time. You know, the tattoo guys, they take care of us. No, that's not what happens. Yeah, I was only going for, I might not make a full hour, but we'll try. Half a million times normally. We've never seen anything close to that in history. The concentrations went up every day, kept going up. It was amazing to see 7,000 kilometers away. It's a matter of life and death. Every nuclear power plant, radiation hemorrhaging out of it from the fuel pools. Snow falling on a Navy ship, the USS Ronald Reagan. Well, it was actually Operation Tomodachi. If I butcher it, sue me. No, don't do that. But the USS Ronald Reagan, we have sailors who've done interviews. We have one of them with Radchick, I watched, where they said they were within a kilometer of Fukushima reactors. And then that was actually in a story later, too. Snow falling by a Navy ship. This is not snow, caused by Fukushima radioactive steam. Is that aluminum foil I taste, sailor? People were defecating on themselves in the hallways from excruciating diarrhea. The hallways were stuffed up. They changed 13 helicopter jet engines because of radiation, because they were flying rescue missions. We saw radiation 300 times safe levels on the ship itself, said one of the officers. And they weren't allowed to sue Japan because they were lab rats. They were with the Navy, right? Experts assume in Reactor 2 had been cracked containment vessel allowed releases directly from the melted reactor core and the radioactive plume blew south. From the reactor core cracking at Reactor 3. Oh, hang on. Reactor 2. Well, here's Reactor 2, rather. Western Tokyo may be contaminated when radiation plume fell to the ground after number 2 core was exposed. That's Reactor 2. But right alongside it is Reactor 3. In fact, Reactor 2 is in the middle between Reactor 1 and Reactor 3, which both lost their fuel pools and reactor cores right away. It's right between them, but they didn't contaminate Tokyo. No, it was Reactor 2 did. You sure it wasn't Reactor 4 fuel pools, because they're missing too. And the inventories we're talking about are catastrophic numbers. Tokyo may have been contaminated when radiation plume fell to the ground after reactor number 2 core was exposed, said Japan professor. What a scumbag, eh? That's a professor, so I'm supposed to respect a monster who suggests that the reason Tokyo may have been contaminated. Now, Tokyo was contaminated because reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 had lost their decades of inventories in the fuel pool and their reactor cores. High concentrations of radiation hit the United States and Canada. The plume was rich in cesium-137. So we'll just go through some of that right quick here. This was the actual plume hitting Canada, United States. This was a French study. No, this was a separate study. There was another one backed up by a French study, this one here. The Radiological Protection Nuclear Safety, the IRS, and the French Institute itself, the government agency, Levels spiked. This is not a projection. This is not a conjecture or an opinion. This is a fact. 1,000,000 times normal. 1,000,000 to 10 million times, which you're talking about, say, 1,000,000 to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137 that they acknowledge. So you could be talking about 20 million atoms per cubic meter of air. And this is what 20 days down the road looks like. You got an invisible plume. It's like a snowstorm, except it covers the whole planet in 20 days. It's an invisible snowstorm of radiation that covers the entire planet after 20 days. It never goes away, and it never stops. Every atom, every snowflake, and think of it, every snowflake, instead, it's an atom, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, 600 feet every second. It's not just cesium. Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239 after just 2.5 days. You have a plume covering the entire planet based on TEPCO's flawed numbers, which doesn't include the inventories from any of the fuel pools, for starters. We're in so much trouble, and this planet is really not able to sustain silence much longer. All the whales will be gone. Like the gray whales will all be gone about 2 years' time. There's 13,000 left, but they're all emaciated. All the migratory, you can't just have half the migratory emaciated, the other half healthy. It doesn't work that way. They all eat the same food, so if half is emaciated, the other half is too. But everyone they saw, it was clear emaciation, starving to death. One Fukushima may destroy the whole country, collapse of a whole country, collapse of a whole planet. Because Fukushima is around 36 reactor cores and 8 fuel pools at the top of 4 reactor buildings. We've lost all of that. That's not up for debate. That's gone. We got to have a conversation about it. We're in real trouble. So you had plutonium / Neptunium-239. You had cesium-137, catastrophic amounts. You had 1,000,000 atoms of Xenon-133 cover the whole planet, less than per square meter underground radioactive fallout disposition. You had 20 million particles of iodine-131, and this is a Canadian study. It can't be iodine-131 unless each one of them pulses energy at the speed of light every second. That's 20,000 pulses of energy every second. So it's going to be 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, which are 9 times more effective than the 131, which is incredibly effective ionizing radiating the thyroid glands of all the species. And then you're going to have 31 times more iodine-129, which happened to show up in a separate study from Ottawa, Canada. So you have different studies on cesium, catastrophic amounts. You have documentation of skewed low numbers, lowball, very stupidly lowball, 1% of these numbers are all covering the planet. You have Xenon-133 covering the planet in 20 days. You have catastrophic, unprecedented, unimaginable amounts of this is all confirmed stuff. Iodine-131, so 132, 133, 129. Catastrophic, we're talking catastrophic numbers too, and 15 million year half-life. Like, you can't pretend this stuff doesn't exist and expect to be respected, okay? You have documentation of it showing up in many different places. These are unbelievable numbers. If I wrote a book like this before Fukushima, nobody would believe it, of course, and appropriately so. And then the comparison of X-rays and CAT scans are meaningless. When you hear that, these are the pundits. These are why the pole is the way it is tonight. Our nuclear scientists, and it should have been journalists and pro-nuclear scum, like zombies, the parasites that hijack human minds. And the idea of that is 80 years of telling people it's like a banana and a potato chip. It's like walking in sunshine. It's like flying on an airplane. It's And people are just incapable of questioning anything they see on TV. The TV told me, So it's like they really are zombies themselves. It's just, the industry can only exist by that routine. So there's a huge amount of effort goes into this. There's over 1,000, we know, they acknowledge 1,000 public relation firms, right, that regurgitate whatever it is the degenerates and the International Atomic Energy Agency or UN will say, right? They're clearly the controllers. They write the scripts. So for the tritium water, the tanks routine, in 2023, August 24th, and we covered it nonstop. It was International Atomic Energy Agency and Japan, and co-works with Taiwan, South Korea, and China. Because that's a huge population of the planet, came out with a concerted effort to promote that tritium was being released, that narrative. And so whenever people protested the tritium, they were put on TV. When people protested the meltdowns that already happened, the inventories were already distributed worldwide, that was ignored or suppressed. But you got all these different isotopes already, so how can we deny that any longer? White blood cell count spikes in Fukushima works. 3,000 plus may not have used dosimeters at the plant just after 3/11. What would 3,000 people do at a nuclear meltdown site? Well, nothing. It's highly dubious to suggest there was 200 people on that site, let alone. It's absurd to suggest there was 3,000 people on that site. Most of them would have died pretty shortly after, if there was. You ejected reactor cores and fuel pools all over the site. You had no control over the site. Right? They slowly clawed back some control, that the homeless weren't dying right away, by they took 16-foot wide, they made special steel, 1 inch thick, and 16 feet wide, and it was like 30 feet long or something. And they had cranes with the big magnets, were dropping these layered over each other. And then they came in with the biggest cement mixers, with the big cement trucks, and they put cement over all these steel plates. And then they came in with more steel plates, more cement, then they put pavement over that. They built up these huge layers before they can send in the homeless to do the minutest jobs. And so, there's 16,000 quit just in 2012 or so, because people were still dropping dead everywhere. And they slowly clawed back some kind of control over the site. The site should have been abandoned, which is crazy, I know, but what you should have done was sacrificed every nuclear academic on the planet. They should have been sacrificed. And we would have gave them, like a 12-gun salute at their funerals in their lead-lined coffins, and the world would be a better place. Went from 33 decontamination workers not showing up, worried about health. Not worried about health, worried about dying. Decontamination workers are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. Weekends off at Fukushima, not one plant worker could be seen. Operational equipment laid idle. A cold, eerie quietness. No birds, no insects, no people. So in Tokyo, sewage plants, 10 out of 12 tested positive in December for iodine, which has a short half-life, which meant the chain reaction was still ongoing, and significantly. And that's 240 kilometers away, so there was huge emissions for that to happen in December of 2011. Canadian radiation tests showed iodine-131 at almost 100 times above the U.S. drinking water limits, which were catastrophic numbers, by the way. April 8, 2000. So Canada, it can't just be, like I showed you all the different isotopes. You can't have 131 without everything else. And Guma, which is right by Tokyo, radioactive iodine in Guma had 3 sewage plants, possibility of recriticality again. That was December. Iodine-131 reported, we just covered that one. Tokyo finds iodine-131 levels up to quadruple cesium levels in the water reclamation centers. These are the water filtration facilities for 36 million people. Should have been shut down and left closed. And then you should have abandoned Tokyo. Because if you keep drinking radioactive water, what happens to you? Well, in the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. They stopped releasing the data on cancer in Japan after the first year. Just bear with me. So your drinking water is compromised permanently. And so your drinking water, your filtration system, the sediment from the water filtration reclamation centers. This is July the 18th, 2011. This is July the 29th, 2011. Just 8 days later. Government says 1,500 tons of highly radioactive sludge may end up as soil for gardening. Highly radioactive sludge. And this was 50,000, what it was there was 50,000 tons of radioactive sludge with radioactive cesium that was too high to be used from the water reclamation facilities for drinking water. So the sediment from the drinking water facilities was considered prime soil, so to speak, right? Or additive for your soils. And 50,000 tons in the first couple of months was so radioactive they couldn't get rid of it. They wanted TEPCO to take it. You're talking 50,000 one-ton pickup trucks worth by July the 29th. So all your drinking water facilities, your pipes, people's showers, their washing machines, everything was sinks, their dishes were all incredibly radioactive from that source. And the filter, as it gathers up radiation, the water coming out the other side is more radioactive. High levels of radioactivity found extensively. Japan says the air 150 kilometers from Fukushima plant is as radioactive as close to the meltdowns. It was something like 270 times more radioactive than peak fallout from nuclear testing. We're almost finished here. There it is. Air samples in Tokyo are 270 times more contaminated. Now, they're only acknowledging gamma, cesium-137, which is brutal, than global weapons fallout peak. These are crazy numbers. Tokyo drinking water unsafe for infants. It's unsafe for infants, is unsafe for everybody else, right? High levels of radioactive material found in the slag. So this is where they take sewage and they dehydrate it. And like when you got 170,000 atoms per kilogram left over, imagine how much was released through the evaporation. This is insane that that is even a thought that could be done. So what they do with that is they actually turn it into cement and other construction material, believe it or not. And then whatever else it's burnt. These are dirty bombs. You can't destroy radiation by burning it. The slag has already been recycled into cement and other construction material. These are incredible numbers. It's just, it's unconscionable that this industry sees this, because they don't want to have waste gathered up and then that could be used against them down the road. And so because there's no checks and balances, nobody gets to see what they're doing till long after it's done. And so when you put the story together like I do and you look at it, and you can talk it out, you can explain why this is wrong and why that is wrong, and when you combine all of these together, this system is not just broken, it's evil. It's not like this is just a bunch of bumbling idiots. Right? This is a coordinated effort we're talking about to allow this stuff to be just released into the environment and reused in the environment when it absolutely unequivocally has catastrophic health consequences. But we're seeing that gets turned into laws. They turn them into laws, and then all nuclear plants have to use that stuff now to make cement, for instance, right? And the industry doesn't have anybody out there that is, they own the media, they own the universities. Like I was going to be in the universities doing lectures, bring the fight to them, right? And what happens? They take my pension away from me within a week. Right? Lucky for me, I can get a different type of pension. But it's going to take a little while longer before I get that. But they crippled me by doing that, right? The Japanese government withheld radiation forecasts to prevent causing panic. The Japanese government. Such a broad term when you're talking about millions of people, right? Well, who specifically done it is the best question, right? In Tokyo, 240 kilometers away, 230,000 atoms per square meter of cesium. What about, for every cesium, there's got to be, which is a muscle seeker, or organ seeker. There has to be a bone seeker, like strontium-90, for instance, or americium, or neptunium, or plutonium, or curium. 6 times the size limit set for radiation control zone. See, they set these limits, but these limits, pre-Fukushima was 0.1 atom per kilogram. After Fukushima happened, they raised the limit to 500 atoms per kilogram, with exceptions to 1,000. You can, if it was food, if you had food pre-Fukushima storage, you can mix that with the current high radiation, drop the levels down to what they call a safe level. I mean, that's mad. That's not even, that's like some prehistoric monster saying, oh, let's do this. It's like taking a kid out of, out of elementary school and saying, how many atoms should we put in the food? 100, 200, 300, 400? And the kid will go, 500. And you say, right, okay, now that's the new law. That's what they're basically doing. Why are they doing that, though? Right? Because the repercussions for poisoning everybody clearly is going to turn up really bad, right? 865,000 cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Am I making any sense at all? Or that's it for us tonight, basically. City with 290,000 people, 60 kilometers from Fukushima. Extremely high radiation detection, not just cobalt, as every other isotope. Surveys did not look at internal exposures, they only looked at external exposures, and people were still well above any permitted level. You got to be a real monster not to look at internal doses, and that's the nuclear industry, isn't it? Full meltdown at all 3 reactors. People are still fighting over that today. They still refuse. They'll look at that and say, well, you don't know, Dana. What are you talking about? Of course I know. You don't know is the problem. All right. Hallelujah. We got it another one. You had 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools in a row. Nobody's getting lucky after this one, okay? We're in real trouble. And now it's manifesting. You have all the whales, gray whales, fear the starving whales migrate. The starving whales migrate north. Last year there were thousands, which is the 13,000 that's left. 14,000 died since Fukushima. The remaining 13,000 last year were in very poor shape. No calves survived last year. Some were born, but they didn't survive the trip south. They left to head north this year, and they're already in poor shape from last fall. The whales they're seeing from the shoreline are extremely emaciated. They have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae, peanut heads visible even from the shoreline. It's horrific. It's hard to appreciate that 4 reactor buildings blowing up and melting down can cause such havoc on this planet, but what else explains all the media and universities pretending that they're at the top of a building that doesn't exist? Because when you look a little deeper, there's 4 buildings in a row. There's 36 reactor cores in the fuel pools, probably, or even more, that are gone now. Each one of us is equal to 100 Chernobyls. All the way, like I've just done 4 days of die-offs. And look how emaciated. You can see the spinal column, you can see the peanut head, you can see the entire... They're not pretending they're on a building for something to do, right? And the censorship on me is just extraordinary, isn't it? It's just pure hate. They do it because they can, I guess. They got nobody else to pick on. They got me tortured. They got me tortured. Hello, everybody. Are nuclear scientists like zombies, the parasites that hijacks the human minds? We pulled off 17 votes. That was pretty good. We're going to end it up with the stranding of flirts, which is James' song. I forgot I had a song queued up there. Oh, he just posted another one. Look at that. No way, man. Yellow Cake Mule. Well, we're going to play that song. Or video, whatever you got there. I might come back and play that one too. The Stranding of Fruit. That's an amazing song. We'll play that too. Let's play this one. So I got 2 songs before we call it a night. It's only an hour's show. That's pretty cool. I love this. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Don't forget now, I'm going to play another song after this one.
Outside Tucumcari, rental truck, paint strip, tires close to failing. Driver says it's a moving job. It's clearly not. One-day contract to cross the state line, latch draws. No household goods inside. Drums stacked to the ceiling. Plastic torn, heavy powder exposed. Yellow cake baby, yellow cake mule. Interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Maybe a 2011 concrete yard, barrels left in rows, 1,000 tons in storage, fence pulled down. Inspectors went in, counted drum by drum, 10 were missing. 5 were found outside, abandoned in the open, left without a guard. Not contraband, wages measured in uranium, loaded at night. Routes not reported, hidden hand, fuel cycle sustains. AIA looks away, police say nothing. Wrong kind of crime, freight moves west. Looks like moving day. Yellow cake mule, interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Truck keeps moving. Highway takes it in. No mercy, no break. Only yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule. throng of whales on the shoreline laid heavy and wrong. The tide bore its burden, a sorrowful sight. The strandings o' the Firth in the dead o' the night. They came in their hundreds, the dolphin, the whale, driven to shallows with a sorrowful tale. The learned men muttered on nets and oh noise, but the seas bear a tally that none can disguise. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men. They'll talk all the weather, they'll talk all the storm. They'll scribble their numbers to keep with the norm. But the count only rises, the carcasses show a reckoning carry wherever tides go. From Raasay to Moray, the tidings run grim. The porpoise and mink now drift at the brim. Yet silence in council halls buries the cost, for silver and power would sooner them lost. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men. The shoreline at dawn, where once the great singers and dancers had gone. Remember the silence, remember the sound, the strandings o' the Firth where the warning is found. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men.